like to introduce our distinguished speaker for today. Don't stand up yet, Kyle, unless you like standing. Kyle Robertson holds a PhD in philosophy from UC Santa Cruz and a JD from UC Berkeley. And I would love to hear how those two interact. In 2015, Kyle co-founded the Center for Public Philosophy at UCSC. He has a passion for everything to do with public philosophy, ranging from high school and high school programs to teaching inside a place which I won't disclose yet because that would steal his thunder, and philosophy for children. He speaks on public philosophy topics and publishes on the challenges of doing public philosophy. It's funny, Socrates did public philosophy all the time and nothing happened to him, did it? In addition to this work, he's a lecturer in the philosophy department at UCSC. He believes that philosophy is a fundamental human activity and that we should practice it in a wide variety of contexts. So today, he's going to speak about the challenges of doing philosophy inquiry outside of a university classroom. Come on up, Kyle. You have permission to stand.
San Quentin State Prison. I'm not trying to hold the thunder. In addition to a lot of other incarcerated environments, I'm just going to talk about San Quentin today. So thank you so much for having me, for that kind introduction. This is my stopwatch. Okay, I'm going to try and keep it to 15 minutes. So I want to try and do three things. Tell you a little bit about why I do what I do, and then describe to you two of the programs that I run, to give you a sense of what public philosophy even means. So I'm going to start with a story, though. A silly story. A month ago, my family and I went to Scotland. So my last name is Robertson, so this was a visit to the motherland for me. I got to go see the Robertson Museum in the middle of Scotland. But as I wanted to do in Scotland, was try Scotch whiskey. I love Scotch. So we went on a whiskey tour. 8 hours of trying whiskey at a bunch of different, it was long. Speyside distilleries, it was wonderful. And our lovely Scottish tour guide, Tony, in hour 7.5, right, as we're headed back to the hotel, we were talking about a lot of esoteric things. And Tony was disclosing what he thought about the world, and he said, and I apologize if the words are too small up here, but I will try and communicate them. He said, how can something come from nothing? And he said that as a sort of culmination of telling us about how he thought about the world. How could something come from nothing? Now, I was in the van with my wife and my brother, who both know me, and they looked at me and they're like, because I'm a philosopher, right? I was like, well, Tony, let's talk about it. I held my tongue then, but I wanted to use this as an example to try and illustrate my claim that we can't not do philosophy. We can only do it well or not so well. And I think this is an example from Tony not doing philosophy so great, right? I don't know if he's right or wrong, but I wanted to ask him a lot of questions. And so, sorry, reaction time's a little delayed. Again, these are going to be, well, maybe you can read these. How can something come from something, Tony? Like, how does change happen at all? Do you understand, is it incremental, continuous? How do things stay the same? How do you know you're you from 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago or 5 years ago? What even is time, right? This thing he's saying implies that we can go back forever in time and always know that there would be, how do we know that, right? Did time start? How can I even say that sentence? How does it make grammatical sense when start is a temporal concept? There's a lot of questions I want to ask Tony, right? And what I want to say is this common sense intuition that something can't come from nothing, it's widespread. If you Google it, you'll see a lot of people basing religious beliefs on this idea that something can't come from nothing. But I think it disintegrates if you start thinking about it very much. So I want to say, I think philosophy is a fundamental characteristic of human activity. And what I mean by this is you can't opt out from thinking about ethics, for example. Not thinking about ethics is an ethical choice, right? You have to think about how to live a good life, and if you choose not to think about it, that's making a choice about how you think you should live a good life. Same thing with epistemology, what you believe, right? How you think about the world. So what motivates me, or part of what motivates me to do philosophy outside the university context, is to try and help us do it better, right? Help this everyday philosophy do better than we otherwise could do if we didn't think about it explicitly. This is maybe most obvious in the first program I wanted to talk to you about, which is philosophy for children, with the little kids. See, I should have my slides in front of me because I lost the order. Before I do that, I wanted to tell you really quickly about the title. So that was when you said I was going to talk about rehabilitation, I winced a little because I'm unsure how I feel about that word. But I took this title from one of my students. This guy's name is Emile de Weaver. He's a formerly incarcerated man who was a student of mine at San Quentin. And he published an article called Human Value, where he makes what I got my title from. I'm just going to read you this brief excerpt. I'm going to tell you a story which isn't exactly scientific evidence about the humanities' role in my transformation and rehabilitation. If we had time, I'd tell you about the hundreds of incarcerated men I know who also found a means of transformation through arts and humanities. A monthly column isn't long enough for that conversation, so I ask that you allow my story to represent them all, in so much as the humanities can prove a powerful tool in both the rehabilitation of those who've broken society's norms and the habilitation of those who have never learned the norms. So that's why I did the little parentheses around this rehabilitation and also habilitation, right? And Emile himself in this article draws an explicit link with his educational experience as a child and his later sort of awakening to the history of the humanities and thinking about these philosophical questions. So Emile was incarcerated when he was 18 for murder, and he got out of prison last year, and he was my age, 40. Right after he was incarcerated, he started to read a lot of things he'd never read before. So he says, even at 19 years old, I recognized the power of what I was reading. I remember closing Anthony T. Browder's Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which for me rewrote the narrative of what it meant to be black. He's a black man who grew up in Oakland, for context. And complaining to my cellmate, why the F weren't they teaching this in school? I was angry because I believed that had I read Emerson and Gibran and Plato in junior high school, I would have thought and behaved differently. But there are no do-overs. So part of another way of saying or explaining what I do is I'm trying to respond to Emile. I'm trying to work with him right now, and I'm trying to say, look, I wish I could have caught you in middle school. Now, I also always, when I say this, there's a caveat. I just teach philosophy. I'm not redoing the systematic inequalities and structural problems that contributed to Emile's life story. But I hope it's something. So philosophy for children. This is a picture of one of the groups in Santa Cruz I work with. It's a former graduate student of mine, Mary. What do we do with philosophy for children? How do we help children do this sort of thing? Well, I want to make a distinction that a friend of mine in Hawaii makes, Tom Jackson. This is Tom sitting with a bunch of kids. He talks about big P philosophy and little p philosophy. And big P philosophy in his description is Kant and Aristotle and the stuff you might teach in a university classroom. And I'm not trying to teach these little guys about Kant and Aristotle and stuff they do in a university classroom. The little p philosophy is all the ways in which we all wonder about the kinds of questions that Kant and Aristotle and all those folks were caught up with, right? How to live a good life, what you should do, what the nature of reality is. And that's what we focus on with the children. So I don't introduce any philosophical texts. What I try and do is create a community of inquiry where they can investigate philosophical questions together. So the first thing we do, how do we do this? The first thing we do is we talk about this concept called intellectual safety. And I do this on the very first day with every group. This is Tom's definition of it. All participants in our community, students and teachers, must feel free to ask any question or state any point of view as long as respect for all persons is honored. Talking about philosophical questions is new to many public school classrooms or classrooms at all. The kids are very used to the types of questions that have a right answer, right? And if they know it, the hands, oh yeah, 2 + 2 = 4. And if they don't know it, they're worried because they know there's a right answer and they don't know what it is. Philosophical inquiry is very different, right? We're asking these types of open-ended questions. And they have to get comfortable with saying an answer that might be good, but they don't know if it's right. And someone else might disagree, but that doesn't mean they're wrong, right? So we have to create this community of safety where they feel happy risking their ideas. The second thing we do is we try and teach them about a juicy wondering question, I call it. So wonder questions, I've seen it in some of the grid literature, right? Wonder more about the world. Teach them about these open-ended questions where there isn't an easy answer. People can disagree and still have good reasons for what they think. And then we also try and bring ones that are juicy, that they care about. Right? You can wonder about things that are relatively trivial, but we try and pick things that the students are motivated to talk about. They care about the answer, right? And here's a list of some of the things I've done. The one I put at the top is one I just did on Friday. What does it mean to be smart? I just talked to a 3rd and 4th grade class about that on Friday. They really care, right? Being smart is something they want to be. They want to be labeled that, but they're worried about it. They're worried that maybe it's a quality they can have or not. I mean, what if I'm not smart? These sorts of questions. Okay. So once we've set up that context and taught them the type of question we want to ask, we give them a lot of tools. And this one I know it's hopeless for you to read on the right. I'll tell you what it is. We have physical tools like this little fluffy ball I'm holding up there. We have a whole process for creating a community ball that we use to facilitate the conversation. And we use as a metaphor for like, we're all in this together. We're all seeking it together. It's not about individual performance or that person knows the right answer. We're a group. And then we give them a bunch of cognitive or intellectual tools. Right? Like, how do you grapple with these types of questions? What would a good answer look like? So on the right, these are all sorts of ideas. We literally make like little pieces of paper like this we hand out. So what's evidence for what you believe? What's an example of it? What's a counterexample? What's an assumption going into what you're saying? Right? All of these types of tools so that they get used to asking and answering these types of questions with each other. And then finally, once we've set up this community, we stay involved. We keep coming back. All right, so there's a variety of models for this. But my favorite, we have a group called Philosopher in Residence, and we're copying the University of Hawaii on this, where someone like me visits the school once a week. So you get the teachers doing this type of philosophical inquiry with their students. I get to come in and sit in and participate in the circle once a week, give the teachers feedback, sort of keep the conversation going. Also, one thing that's really useful that I haven't got yet, if you get a whole school involved, we do this sort of inquiry circle with the teachers also. One of the most powerful ways that teachers can learn what it's like to do this is to do it themselves on issues they care about, right? Create a space of intellectual safety among their colleagues, which may not exist at the institution before that. All right, that's the basic idea of philosophy for children. This type of inquiry, friends of mine have done with all sorts of different groups. So some people have done it with incarcerated students. I have not yet. It's a totally different program that I run in San Quentin, but I think has some of the same interests involved. It's a form of debate. So I am the debate coach for San Quentin. Inside San Quentin, there's a program called the Prison University Project. It's a fully functioning community college program inside San Quentin. They're actually seeking accreditation right now to become the first accredited university inside San Quentin. It would be remarkable. I think they'll do it. They've been going for a long time. One of the things they wanted was extracurricular programs, right? Men in there are in there for a very long time sometimes. And they finish their degrees and want to remain academically involved. And the number one requested program they have is debate. I can tell you about it at lunch. There's a history of debate inside these communities, right? Malcolm X, for instance, wrote about his experience learning debate when he was incarcerated, being instrumental in his life and who he became after his incarceration. So I was lucky enough to be able to pitch Ethics Bowl, an alternative form of debate, to the organizers of the Prison University Project. They bought it, and so now I coach the Ethics Bowl team. This is, these 5 men were the first Ethics Bowl team at San Quentin. And next week I'll be starting the 3rd year of this. So very briefly, what is Ethics Bowl? There's some big differences between what Ethics Bowl is and what you might have seen as debate, like on a TV show or your own high school experience. It's not forensic debate. And I'll tell you the differences that I think are most meaningful. It's collaborative, so you're competing as a team, and you always argue what you actually believe. Right? So the goal of Ethics Bowl is not to pick an issue, you flip a coin, you go one way or the other, and you tear the other side apart. Even though everyone knows the side you're arguing was determined by a coin flip, or it's random. In Ethics Bowl, you're arguing what you really think, and the goal is a better answer, right? There's no agreement on what the issue is. There's only the description of a case. So for example, in this year's cases, I'll give you 2, just for time, although I have the whole set if you're interested here. We have one case about a legal case in Alabama, where a woman was indicted on manslaughter charges. She was pregnant. She started a fight. Everybody agreed that she was the instigator of the violence. And as a result of the violence, she miscarried. And in Alabama, that fetus has individual standing, and the district attorney charged her for manslaughter against her own fetus. That's what, in the case, it describes that. It doesn't tell you what the issue is. It describes that actual case, and the team has to think, well, how do we approach this? What is the right political and moral approach to this kind of case? Okay, I'll leave other examples for afterwards if you want to ask me about it. Okay, the second thing that's really different, again, you're not scored for convincing the judges the other team did a bad job. You're scored for how much you move the conversation forward yourself. So if the other team gives a rough presentation and you're commenting on it, your job is to pick out the most useful and interesting thing they said and build on it. It's not to point out that they did a bad job. Everybody can see, if they missed it. The best ethics bowl team makes the other team better. Right? It's not like a sporting event where the best team just crushes the other team. It tries to raise the level of the dialogue. And then finally, how does all of this happen? Well, the judges participate. They're not passive spectators. In many debate formats, the judges are scoring, right? They're just watching the performance. In ethics bowl, it's a little more like an appellate judge. They're like, why did you say that? What do you think about this? They engage in the debate also. It becomes much more active and there's much more to it. Okay. So what we do in San Quentin, we have a bunch of logistical challenges, but fundamentally what we do is we try and create a team that can participate in the college ethics bowl. So there's a national championship college ethics bowl circuit for all of this, right? Hundreds of universities compete in this format, including UC Santa Cruz where I teach. But also Stanford, San Jose State, Santa Clara, we all have ethics bowl teams in the Bay Area. What I do is I create a team inside San Quentin to compete against these college teams. So we have to bring all the materials in because they can't research on it. They don't have internet access, right? But I meet with them just like a normal class in the fall. And then in the winter, we have rounds. That's where you saw the picture from. So this is the first round we ever did. The UC Santa Cruz team is on the right side of this picture, and the San Quentin team is on the left, and you have the judges and others participating. So far, we've been able to bring in Stanford University a couple times also. San Jose State was coming, but then it happened at a time of the really awful fires and everything shut down in San Quentin during that time. And that's what we do. There are other colleagues of mine doing ethics bowl teams inside a prison. So there's one guy at Bakersfield who does it, but so far technical challenges are insurmountable for having two inmate teams compete against each other. Okay, so that's the brief of what I do, why I do it. I talked about, and I think it's been made reference, what I might be offering to them, right, or what people might get out of philosophy. I want to end with a really brief comment on what I think philosophy can get from this type of activity. I was thinking about a sports analogy on the drive over here. I think philosophy is a little too much like lacrosse. Not that lacrosse is bad, but I was thinking, lacrosse and basketball, if you compare it, right? If you want to be a great basketball player, there are courts all over the place. All you need is a ball. Many people who come from low-income or underprivileged families can play and become excellent at basketball. Lacrosse takes a huge amount of buy-in generally. Now it's changing. The internet tells me this is changing, right? But traditionally, lacrosse is a sport of prep schools. It takes a lot of equipment. It takes a big field to play. If you are the best lacrosse player in the world right now, I don't think you have a reason to think that you're better at lacrosse than anyone if everyone had a fair chance to. Right? It's a very severely limited pool that ever gets to play lacrosse. I think philosophy, academic philosophy, is in the same position. Academic philosophy is extremely elitist, right? I don't know how many stories I've heard of people telling me about their intro to philosophy class at university and how they never wanted to go back because of what they did in that intro class. It's very inaccessible, it's seen as really difficult and esoteric, and I don't think it should be, right? I think if we could change our culture to see how woven into everyday life philosophical questions are, we could maybe expand the reach of academic philosophy, right? I feel like there's a lot of gifted philosophers who are never writing or engaging with academic philosophers, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. So, thank you so much for having me.